Thank you to the State Archive for asking me, and thank you guys for showing up on a second time. The last time I was supposed to do this, I was scheduled to do it, and my appendix decided to explode. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come back and to talk to you guys about South Pass City and the Carissa Mine project. So we're going to start off with it does, thank you. I really appreciate that when people say it looks so different. So what we are looking at right here is a photograph of the Carissa Mine and Mill buildings at South Pass City. This has been an extraordinary project. I've been lucky since 2003 to be the superintendent at South Pass City and have the opportunity to kind of be the one on the ground with this restoration project. And it has been an incredible learning experience and an amazing project for the state of Wyoming. It is truly one of the most unique properties. It is on the National Register, and it is an extraordinary place with some extraordinary history and an extraordinary archive that goes with it. So I definitely, when Sara asked me to come in and talk about the Carissa and South Pass City, I really wanted to say yes. And the archives here at the Wyoming State Archives and some of the other archives in the state have been incredibly important to us in this process. So we're going to give kind of a 10,000-foot view of how the Carissa Restoration Project started, how it is going. It is an ongoing process, and how we use archives to do this amazing project. So this feels very glamorous. To swipe the page and things like that. So a brief history of South Pass City, just kind of a quick touching on the history of South Pass and the Carissa Mine. So South Pass City's history is in a way tied to the immigrant trails. It had its first boom in 1868. So it's about 20 years after the trails started to taper off. So the California Trail particularly, the people trying to get to the gold camps in California in 1849, that was really important for us. They really started to have rumors about gold, particularly in the Sweetwater River, in 1849. So there was people probably passing by South Pass, and they were going, well, they were gold panning as they went, found some color in their pans, and it was there, but it wasn't enough to stop them to go to California. 1849, they get to California, they start working. The Civil War comes into the picture. A lot of soldiers are conscripted into the Union Army or the Confederate Army, and they fight the Civil War. 1865, it ends. Return them to camps, particularly Fort Bridger, and encourage them to start prospecting, to start settling, to start looking for ranch land, farmland, that sort of thing. So these miners may have been in 1867, may have came from those California camps. We don't know for sure. What we do know is 4 soldiers from Fort Bridger came to what was then an unnamed valley full of willows, and were looking for gold. And they discovered that spot on a hillside above a creek that they called Willow Creek, very creative. But they found it in 1867. They set the very first mineral claim in the state of Wyoming, in Wyoming Territory and the state of Wyoming. And it was called the Carissa Lode Claim. It's kind of interesting that Carissa name isn't the Carissa. We've always kind of wondered about that. What it is there's actually a gold mining town in California that's called Carissa. And it's also a type of grass that grows in California. So that's one of the connections that we think may have happened with the Uh, Naming of it. Interestingly enough, we think that the miners were not particularly fond of the name Carissa, so they feminized it. It became Carissa. So it was the heart of the Sweetwater Mining District. The Sweetwater Mining District is South Pass City, Atlantic City, Hamilton City, which is also called Miners Delight, and Lewiston. There's a group of towns that all popped up about the same time where they were trying to make a living as gold miners. And it was a big deal for a very short period of time. 1868, about 2,500 people lived in South Pass City, and about 3,000 people lived within the Sweetwater Mining District. That fell off very quickly. 1872, people started to leave. Of course, one of our most famous residents at the time, and we lost her to you guys here in Cheyenne, was Esther Hobart Morris. She was the first woman justice of the peace. She did that at South Pass City. We were also the home of the legislator that William Bright, who was the sponsor of the equal suffrage bill that passed through the Wyoming legislature. The Carissa started off in the 1870s almost immediately with investment from somewhere else. So it started with some investment from Salt Lake City, moved on to Chicago, moved on to Seattle, moved on to Boston, had multiple different corporate support that kept it going. Its on and off operations were, I'm going to make a joke about this. As a historian, I love lawsuits because it really tells us the history of what was really going on. And the Carissa has had some real doozies. One of them even made it to the state Supreme Court. So the preservation of history in those documents is amazing. So, but it also is one of the things that kept the Carissa intact. Some pieces were sold off of the Carissa, but those lawsuits really kept it from completely being abandoned because there was always somebody that wanted to make a go at the place, and it never really took off. The historic site itself, South Pass City, was created in 1968, and it was originally 72 acres and about 20 historic buildings. In 2003, the Wyoming legislature did an amazing thing. They decided to buy a gold mine, which is amazing. They turned around and a group of legislators were contacted by the owner of the mine at the time, a Canadian corporation, and they were willing to sell the gold mine, the Carissa, to the historic site. It came with over 200 acres, 280 acres of ground, and it came with another additional 20 historic structures, and it was an amazing thing that they did. It opened to the public for public tours in 2013. So very quick kind of coverage of that. We've had some amazing partners to do this project with. So the Abandoned Minelands Department of the Department of Environmental Quality. So Evan Green is in the back. We worked with him for quite a while. State Parks and Cultural Resources, of which the State Archives is part of, and so is State Parks and Historic Sites. Respec Engineering, which Brett is in the back as well, is a local engineering firm here based in Cheyenne, and State Historic Preservation Office, the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund, and then our friends of South Pass City have been either part of the planning process, the consultation process, or they've been funding sources for the work that was done at the historic site. The scope of this project was huge, and it was kind of daunting for everybody that came into it. That property was an industrial site. So it operated up until 1954. You used such wonderful processes, cyanide systems, mercury was used extensively, so there was hazardous waste concerns. There was about 14 open mine shafts on the property, ranging in depth from just a few feet as a prospect pit to some of the larger features that were several hundred feet deep. It was a big addition to the historic site, so the strategic planning that was necessary to go into figuring out how this huge property and this huge project was going to be integrated into South Pass City's development was right in front. So one of the first things that we did was do a strategic planning process to figure out how to do the restoration, how to build it into our programming. Structural stabilization was another huge feature. The main Carissa Mill building is 22,000 square feet, and it's a timber structure that sits on dry stacked foundations. So it's an amazing structure, but of course it's been there for a long time. It had been used as an industrial site for processing gold, and it was needing help. Its roof was gone, its windows were gone, and there was a lot of work that had to happen on that. That was multi-phases and is still going on to this day. Electrification was a big thing. The building that we'll be looking at today, the interior was largely set, and what people see today is post-World War II. So the electrics are important in that building, and it ranges from 440 power to run these massive pieces of equipment that we demonstrate down to regular light bulbs that hang from the ceiling. We reconstructed the head frame and trestle, which is a structure that connected the two main buildings on the site. The operating shaft, ore was brought out of it, was hand pushed across a trestle, 450 feet by probably a 13-year-old boy, and put through the mill to process to get the gold. We had an extraordinary opportunity again with the legislature. Both the head frame and the historic equipment replacement were legislative appropriations that helped us go into the Carissa and put in missing pieces that were there. And then the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund was incredibly important in helping us with our interpretation and our exhibition of the interior spaces. So Evan probably recognizes this. What we got? This was an amazing thing. Like I said, this is the main Carissa building here. This is the mill building. This is where ore was processed. It was actually moved to this location in 1929 from Atlantic City, which is 4 miles away. So this huge timber structure had been taken down, moved into its place to expand the operations with the Carissa, and it operated in 1929 for about a year. The owners went bankrupt. They got themselves into a lawsuit, and it wasn't cleared up until 1946. So 1946 rolls around, and the post World War II gold is a commodity again. It's out there being sold and processed. So they completely revamp the interior, remodel, and go into gold production. They ran that until 1954, 1955. They flipped the switches and walked away. And when we got it in 2003, this is what it looked like. So it was in rough condition. The bones were incredibly good. The amazing thing about this building is it is just amazingly built. From what we understand from archival research, this mill was probably ordered from the Northwest coast. You could actually order them out of mining catalogs. So you needed an 80-ton a day operation. All you had to do was write a letter and say, I need this shipped by a point of rocks 80 miles across the Red Desert, and they would get it to you. A really fascinating thing about this is every single stick of this was brought across the Red Desert on a horse and wagon. So also the equipment is on the inside. So it's just a testimony of how crazy we are for gold. I have been at South Pass now. This is my 21st season, actually, and I've never caught the gold bug. So we were faced with a real issue when 2003 came around, and we were used to talking about Esther Morris. We were talking about saloon life. We were talking about everyday life in South Pass City. All of a sudden, we've got the mining operation, and not a single one of us up there was miners. And we had some really amazing challenges ahead of us. Hazardous waste. My degree is in art history. So it was an amazing experience to come into this. We had, again, those partners made it amazing. And then also the paperwork. We panicked and we started doing what most historians do, and that's root around in the paperwork. That is where we really started to learn. We walked into the Carissa in 2003. We had no idea how it operated. We had very little idea about its chain of ownership. We didn't have any idea of just the nuance of this place. But we quickly started to learn. So what I'm going to do in terms of talking about how our process is, I'm going to quickly go over some of the resources that we used to figure out how and what to do with the Carissa. And then we'll kind of delve into one of the projects that we did and how we use those archives. So the first one, it was kind of one of the most important ones, was the science. And this is where AML really came in and really helped us in an amazing way. The Carissa is a gold mill. They use chemical processes, mechanical and chemical processes, to break up ore. They'll treat ore with certain chemical systems. Their primary system was a reverse cyanide decantation system. We did not know what that was when we started. It was just a bunch of big tanks with tailings in the bottoms of them. And we knew that it involved cyanide. So we didn't know, but AML came in. The first thing was to go in and do a really rigorous testing regime from everything from soil samples to deposits on the physical structure, the beams, and that sort of thing, to an amazing process of these tanks that we're looking at are part of that cyanide system. The ones that this gentleman is in the bottom, I feel sorry for him. It was, as you can see, it was November 21st. He was from Corpus Christi, Texas, at South Pass City. And they had to jackhammer this material out of the bottom of that tank. It had been there since they shut down operations. And it all had to be vacuum trucked out of this building. What that science did and that research and that information really informed what we could do with the public. So at that point in time, we came out and we were going, okay, we've got to be able to get people into this building. It's an extraordinary structure. AML did an amazing job of turning around and bringing that physical safety in. And it would come in later phases as well with handrails, walking paths, and other mitigation elements. So the science is one of the first ones. This is a major one for us. The visual record is incredible for us in terms of restoration. And so Wyoming State Archives particularly was really important to us for this. We used, in terms of gaining the understanding of the development of the property over time from 1867 all the way up until the 1950s. There were multiple sources that we used, some of them here at the Wyoming State Archives. Of course, the Stimson collections, the J.E. Stimson collections. He came through in 1904 and photographed one of the first mill houses that was on the site. This mill house is not the one that is currently there, this image right here. It is actually this building right here, and then this is in 1929 when they're building the new mill right next door. But that progression is incredibly important to us, and the photographs are the way to do it. And we have an amazing collection of photographs, some of them from Wyoming State Archives. We also have our archive at South Pass City. We have several private archives that are related to families that are tied to South Pass, that have been major impact for us in terms of getting that visual representation right. The written record is incredibly important to us. We have, without that written record, we can't tell their story. And that is the amazing thing about the Carissa, is there's so many people that are tied to it that have these incredible stories, and as an interpreter of history, that is what makes it important, and that is what makes it relate to people. So we have 3 documents here. This is just one of thousands that we were able to collect. Some of them, this one actually is the records of the California Mining District, organized September 13th, 1867. It's actually here in the State Archive. And the California Mining District is the Sweetwater Mining District. It is the Carissa Mining District. So there's another tie that kind of goes, these guys were hoping it was going to be another California. Up here, it eventually became known as the Shoshone Mining District. Just shortly after that, that's a piece that's in our collection. And then we'll talk about this in a little bit later, some of the diagrammatic components of the equipment that was in the Carissa mill. So that written record really is amazing for us. Oral histories these are the fun ones. Yeah. I present to you Miss Zoe Green. She is packing 6 guns there. She was a force of nature at South Pass City. I, of course, never met her, but I feel like I know this woman. She was 25. The Carissa building that is currently on the site was originally built in 1904 in Atlantic City. The 1929 rolled around, and the Carissa was actually starting to expand. They needed a bigger mill. So instead of ordering up a new one and having it shipped off, they decided, okay, let's just buy the mill that's in Atlantic City and move it. They hired Zoe to do that. 25 years old. She ran a crew of 10 men. And the amazing thing about it is they were tracking this in the Lander Journal and the Riverton Ranger at the time. She started in April and she finished in September. Completely took the building completely apart, moved it, and then put it back up. She has family ties to South Pass City. There's still relatives of hers that own property in South Pass City. We had some of their photographs, but one day we were posting on Facebook an image of Zoe, and we were talking about the moving of the Carissa, and a woman DM'd us and said, I have some photographs of moving that building. And we're like, okay, we want to see them. She did. She shared those with us. She now has gifted those to us at South Pass City. The amazing thing about it is her father was Zoe's foreman that was taking them apart. So he was able to send us images. They were able to send us images of the 1929 mill being reassembled. And the Atlantic City Historic Site, another archive holding organization, they did these amazing oral histories in the 1970s and 80s. They were able to interview Zoe. And so in her interview, and she's, I think she calmed down a little bit as she grew older. She's very reserved in these audio recordings. She talks about this truck. That's the truck that she drove back and forth from Atlantic City with the beams of the building stacked on it. It eventually lost its reverse. So she had to drive down into the location. She did load right about there. She'd have to do it everything in forward. So those oral histories have been amazing for us. We've actually had people that worked in the Carissa in the 1940s come in and talk to us about what their work experience was like in the environment. So that's been an amazing element that has really informed how we interpret and the story we tell. So one of the projects that I'm going to talk about very specifically is the equipment replacement. The Carissa had multiple kind of phases of activity in terms of its industrial processes. So there was a set of equipment that was in there in 1929. Of course, they went bankrupt. They remodeled it in the 1940s. When they shut down in 1954, there was yet another lawsuit, and it kept it in stasis for quite a while. But then there was small portions of that equipment that was sold off. But the core of that process, those processing equipment, was missing for us. And as interpreters, it's really difficult to say, I want you to imagine this huge piece of machinery and it spins and it grinds things up and it processes gold, and everybody would give you the same look that you're giving me right now. And so we were like, okay, let's see what we can do. And this was an amazing process. We actually had one of a legislator from Laramie, Kermit Brown, who just asked me one day, how much would it take to figure this out? And I just pulled a number. And the amazing thing about it is all of a sudden that at the end of that legislative session, we had that number. And so it began this amazing process to replace the crushing circuit is what it's called. Another one of our amazing resources that we have is the Historic American Buildings Survey that was done is housed now in the Library of Congress. And as part of the bicentennial, this amazing troupe of architectural historians went out across the United States and documented historic buildings from East Coast to West Coast. And the Carissa was one of those. And I've got this spot right here. This is what the mill very much looked like for us when we came in. There's this huge thing that is missing. And so this is where I would honestly stand at these foundations that you can see right here. I'd say, use your imagination. And it was a really difficult tour. So we began the process of trying to track down the equipment. We were able to find one out of the 5 pieces of equipment, but we were able, through archives, to get matches to everything else. So there's nothing more boring than a spreadsheet, but I love this spreadsheet because this represents a lawsuit. And like I said, I really love lawsuits. This was done by the Pioneer Carissa Corporation. This was in 1956. They went bankrupt. They were sued. And this is the inventory that a lawyer did as he walked through the building. And on this inventory is my ball mill. And also on this inventory is all of the engines, all of the motors, all of the pieces of equipment that were on the inside of that building that help us figure out what needs to go back in there. The interesting thing about this is it's very detailed. Even some of them had serial numbers. So we began the process of trying to track down the ball mill, a mineral jig, and a classifier, and a Wilfley table. So the interesting thing about it is we were able to find the Wilfley table just down the street. A local miner who worked for this corporation later on, they couldn't pay him. So they said, take equipment. So he did. He took the Wilfley table. He gave that back to us. The ball mill and the classifier mineral jig were pieces of equipment that were used to crush the ore. It was taken probably to Jeffrey City and used in the uranium mines. So when it was past its functional life, they probably buried it. So we don't know exactly what happened to it, but we do know exactly what they were. So we were able to turn around and order from a dealer in Nevada an exact match. Even found it was even cast in the same year as the one that was originally in the Carissa. And what a ball mill is, so I will kind of explain what happens. It is a huge tumbling mechanism. Think of a rock crusher. Well, think of a rock polisher, actually, as a good way to put it. Except it's got about 3 tons of steel balls on the inside. It spins and it crushes ore. When we found that that mill, we were able to bring it in, but we had some questions about the foundations were not as robust as we felt that they should be. This thing weighs 23,000 pounds when it's empty, and they will usually put 3 to 8 tons of steel balls on the inside of it, on top of it. So we didn't have any documents of the kind of what it needed to have in terms of a foundation. Respec, which was the engineering firm, hired a consultant. We went to the Denver Public Library, which is the home of the Colorado Iron Works, which is the manufacturer of these ball mills. And their archive was there, and they were able to bring back drawings that were exact descriptions of how to build the foundations for this ball mill. So again, archives helping us out do these massive, slightly crazy projects. You can see this guy right here. This is the ball mill. That's the match. And it was constructed, it was forged by the Colorado Iron Works and shipped to the Carissa. It was brand new when they bought it. And it operated there, like I said, from the 1946 to 1954 era. This replacement, the match, came in, and you can see these 2 huge excavators picking it up. We had to take the side of the building out to move the ball mill into its new foundations that were informed by the documents that we found from the Denver Public Library. Interior shot of the mill as they moved this huge ball mill into place. Just shows you what kind of cramped quarters we were working in, and setting it down into its pinion gears. All of this information was gathered from an archival source. This was an amazing project, and we could not have done it without those sources. I'm sure the engineers would have been able to have figured it out and that sort of thing, but it made it so much quicker, so much more efficient, and it also gives us the story as interpreters to tell. The final result is here is a 4th grade school group from Rock Springs, actually, and they are looking at the ball mill in its location. All of this equipment functions. Again, we were very focused on trying to make it as experiential as we possibly could. So this thing runs. You can see them putting their fingers in their ears. It's incredibly noisy. Those oral resources that we talked about, the oral histories, they talked about the men that were working in there. They would actually melt paraffin wax onto cotton fabric and shove that into their ears as ear protection. So we want to have the kids have that experience of what it was like to work in this industrial environment. So what's next? The Carissa is constantly under work. It is a massive project that will keep us going for quite a while. We have everything from walkways. The Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund helped us with our exhibits and interpretation. So as you go through the Carissa tour, you actually get to follow the workers as they went to work. The walkways and interpretation that is in the buildings was helped by funding from Wyoming State Parks and from the Cultural Trust Fund. Right now, our friends of South Pass had an amazing experience. This gentleman here is, his name is Larry Rode. He spent his entire career as a fire assayist. And what an assayist is they are the chemists that worked in mills like the Carissa, and they would test the ore as it was being processed and see what production measures needed to be done with it. So they were the ones that decided what kind of chemical treatments needed to happen and how often. He has come and he's volunteered with us, and with our friends of South Pass City, we are now in the process of exhibiting the assay lab that was inside of that mill. And he'll be giving a presentation about that on the 21st of June. So there is an amazing amount of information that we find every single day about the Carissa. Most of it comes from an old document, an old photograph, or someone telling us a story. So that's what's next, is we want to turn around and make sure that that story is being told, those documents are being preserved, and that the Carissa is constantly moving forward as a historic site, not as a gold mine. So I want to thank you for your time. If you're interested, there's a tremendous amount of information at the Wyoming Parks website, and then also our Friends of South Pass City website, which is southpasscity.org. There's a huge amounts of information and more details about the restoration process at the Carissa.
Wow.
So, any questions? Go ahead.
When are tours?
The tours are Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays during the summer months, usually from Memorial Day through Labor Day. So we have been staying open later into October because we've been having beautiful falls. So if you're headed up there, it is definitely worth it. We have another feature that we have tours of at the same time. Actually, earlier in the morning at 11 o'clock, it's called the English Tunnel. It was another restoration project that we did that was very archivally based. It is a adit, which is a underground tunnel that intersects the surface that was dug in 1870. And we were able to track its location down through historic documents, some of them coming from the State Archive here. And we've opened that back up, and we take people on a tour of that. It's an amazing tour because it's an early mining operation. It was before they had carbide lamps or electric lamps on their hats. So they actually used candles. And that's how we do the tour. So
it goes from where to where?
It's an underground tunnel that intersects the surface of the earth, and it's about 300 feet long. What it was a neighboring claim to the Carissa was trying to find the quartz vein that the Carissa was operating on. So they were trying to find it, and they didn't find it, but they left us a great feature.
Is there any ore there at all?
We have several geologists that we work with, and there are people that think that there is gold there, but it's a tremendous depth, 3,000 feet. The main operating shaft that the Carissa has, which was sunk in the 1890s, the late 1890s, is only 450 feet.
Oh,
so they were probably just scratching the surface. So
How much ore do they actually
A great archival question. We received a grant to send some researchers down to the Denver Mint here a few years ago. And one of our staff went down and worked at the Denver Mint for about a week, getting their records. And they were able to piece together the deposit records because most of the gold that was deposited from the Carissa went to the Denver Mint. So they were able to put together periods of time. And the estimate is around 224,000 ounces. So that sounds like a lot, but in modern gold production, it's yeah, that's why they went broke all the time. They didn't do as well as they had hoped.
Joe, what is your favorite part of the mine or the site?
My favorite is I really love giving the tours because there is a resonance that happens in the Carissa. People every day have a job. They have an idea of what work is like. And you walk through that place and you really have a sense because of this project of what work was really like and how hard it was. This massive building, 22,000 square feet, was probably run by 4 people. Ooh. So there's these incredibly complex pieces of machinery, chemistry, all of this kind of stuff. And there was just 4 people running around in that building, keeping it all going. And that is really amazing to me that people could sense that that was a lot of work. And it was that it makes sense to them that, oh, that I can understand why they did it, but I can also understand why they left. Anything else? Well, once again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.